All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a side of American history that you don't normally see. We're talking about a hidden world of power, of wealth, of secrets. We're going to explore the American underworld and the plots that official records say were hatched from within.
And really, it all boils down to one pretty unsettling question that these documents force us to confront. Just how far would some of the most powerful people in America go to get and keep control?
Now, I want to be clear, this isn't about guesswork or wild theories. We are diving straight into declassified government files and actual sworn testimony given before Congress. And these official sources, they tell three, frankly, incredible stories about plots cooked up in the highest corridors of power.
Okay, so our first story, it's a wild one. It comes from the depths of the Great Depression, and it raises a question that's almost unthinkable. Could some of the country's richest men actually plot to overthrow their own president? The source material here is all about something called the business plot.
So, what was this all about? Officially, it's known as the Business Plot of 1933. And the allegation, which was brought right to Congress, was that a group of incredibly powerful financiers and industrialists were so freaked out by FDR's New Deal policies that they cooked up a plan to kick him out of office and install a dictator.
Now, the guy they allegedly tried to get to lead this whole thing was Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated and respected Marines in American history. And Butler? Well, he knew how this world worked. He famously said it himself. He was a high-class muscle man for Wall Street, a racketeer for capitalism. He was an insider. He got it.
So according to Butler's own sworn testimony, here's what the plotters wanted him to do. They wanted him to lead a private army 500,000 men strong, made up of veterans. The plan? March on Washington, D.C., take over the White House, and basically push President Roosevelt to the side, leaving Butler in charge as a kind of puppet leader.
So how did people react? Well, at first, not well. The media basically laughed it off. The New York Times called it a gigantic hoax. But when a congressional committee actually listened to Butler's testimony and looked into it, they came to a very, very different conclusion. Their final report confirmed they had verified Butler's statements and that a plot like this was, quote, actually contemplated. And this idea of American financial interests getting cozy with fascist movements, well, according to our sources, it wasn't just a domestic problem. Our next story, which comes from declassified U.S. government documents, dives into some really deep financial ties between Wall Street and Nazi Germany. Let's just walk through this timeline, because it shows how this relationship just got deeper and deeper over almost 20 years. It starts in 1924. The Union Banking Corporation, or UBC, is formed. And who's managing it? Prescott Bush. Yep, the father and grandfather of future U.S. presidents. He's managing the bank for a German steel tycoon, who was one of Hitler's earliest and biggest financial backers. This relationship goes on and on all the way to 1942. That's nearly a full year after the U.S. had entered World War II, when the government finally stepped in and seized UBC's assets under the Trading with the Enemy Act. And when you look at the names listed in these documents, wow, it's a who's who of 20th century American power. You've got Prescott Bush, you've got Averell Harriman, you've got the Dulles brothers, one a future Secretary of State, the other a future CIA director, all connected to these major firms doing business with key German industries.
So, what were the consequences of all this? Well, a 1945 Treasury Department report broke it down, and the numbers for just one of these firms are absolutely staggering. United Steel provided the Nazi war machine with over half of its pig iron and more than a third of its explosives. And according to those same government sources, Prescott Bush was the firm's banker.
And look, this wasn't just about association. This was about money. When Union Bank was finally liquidated in 1951, years after the war was over, the sources show that Prescott Bush walked away with $1.5 million. That's a huge fortune back then, and it came directly from a business that was seized for trading with the enemy.
Okay, that brings us to our final story. And if you thought the first two were something, this one came from inside the house. A plot not by outsiders, but from within the U.S. government itself. This is Operation Northwoods.
This was dug up from declassified files. Operation Northwoods was a very real, top-secret proposal from the Department of Defense, written in 1962. And its purpose was stated very clearly:
to create a justification, a fake reason for a full-blown military invasion of Cuba.
The steps laid out in this document are, well, they're chilling. The plan called for starting a fake communist Cuban terror campaign on American soil, in Miami, in D.C. This included actually bombing civilian targets. It proposed sinking boats filled with Cuban refugees out on the ocean. And maybe wildest of all, it detailed a plan to fake a U.S. military plane being shot down, using a repainted drone that would be destroyed by remote control and blaming it all on Cuba.
And you have to hear the cold, bureaucratic language from the document itself. The whole point, it says, was to place the United States in the apparent position of suffering defensible grievances. In other words, it was a detailed, officially sanctioned plan for a false flag operation, the U.S. government committing acts of terror against its own interests just to justify starting a war.
So you have to be asking, who in their right mind would propose something like this? The answer is pretty shocking. The document was signed and approved by the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff, the top military leaders in the country. And who stopped it from happening? President John F. Kennedy. He rejected the plan flat out. Okay, let's just take a breath and step back for a second. Let's look at all three of these stories side by side. Are they just three weird, isolated incidents, or do these sources suggest there might be a recurring pattern in how power works behind the scenes?
You know, when we lay them out like this, a potential pattern starts to take shape. In the 30s, you have industrial elites allegedly trying to stage a coup. Then in the 30s and 40s, you have financial elites allegedly profiting from a future enemy. And then in the 60s, you have military elites allegedly planning to attack their own country to start a war. Different players, different decades, but the sources all point to a similar kind of thinking, using secret, covert means to get what you want politically.
So when you put it all together, what these declassified documents and sworn testimonies appear to show us is a really disturbing picture. We're talking three separate instances spread across 40 years that seem to involve America's most powerful groups, financial, industrial, and military, all allegedly working to subvert national policy or even the government itself.
Every single one of these stories was kept secret from the public for decades. They only came to light because of whistleblowers and official declassification. And that leaves us with one last, unavoidable question. If these are the plots we know about, what else is still sitting unseen in the corridors of power?